a swarthy body like the petals of a blue lotus. He bears a conch, discus, and mace in three of his hands. I'm not sure what swarthy means. Swarthy. I think it means something like a little bit chubby. Maybe we can look up the word swarthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Huh?
I'm looking at that up. Swarthy.
Swarthy.
It was to someone with a dark complexion or skin tone. So some dark complexion or skin tone.
Okay. So the Supreme Personality Godhead has a cheerful, lotus-like countenance with ruddy eyes. So countenance means like face, and ruddy eyes mean reddish eyes, like the interior of a lotus, and a swarthy body, like the petals of a blue lotus. He bears a conch, discus, and mace in three of his hands. So, so swarthy means what again?
Dark complexion.
Dark complexion. Okay. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It is definitely recommended herein that one concentrate his mind upon the form of Vishnu. There are 12 different forms of Vishnu, which are described in teachings of Lord Chaitanya. One cannot concentrate his mind on anything void or impersonal. The mind should be fixed on the personal form of the Lord, whose attitude is cheerful. As described in this verse, Bhagavad Gita states that meditation on the impersonal or void features is very troublesome to the meditator. Those who are attached to the impersonal or void features of meditation have to undergo a difficult process because we are not accustomed to concentrating our minds upon anything impersonal. Actually, such concentration is not even possible. Bhagavad Gita also confirms that one should concentrate his mind on the personality of Godhead. The color of the personality of Godhead, Krishna, is described here as Nilot Pala Dala, meaning that it is like that of a lotus flower with petals tinted blue and white. People always ask why Krishna is blue. The color of the Lord has not been imagined by an artist. It is described in authoritative scripture. In the Brahma Samhita also, the color of Krishna's body is compared to that of a bluish cloud. The color of the Lord is not poetical imagination. There are authoritative descriptions in the Brahma Samhita, Srimad Bhagavata, Bhagavad Gita, and many of the Puranas of the Lord's body, his weapons, and all other paraphernalia. The Lord's appearance is described here as Padma Garbhanurune Shanam. His eyes resemble the inside of a lotus flower, and in his four hands he holds the four symbols: conch shell, discus, mace, and lotus. Well, that is some good information about the form of the Lord and the uniqueness of the Lord. Text 14. His lotus, his loins are covered by a shining cloth, yellowish like the filaments of a lotus. And on his breast he bears the mark of Shivatsa, a curl of white hair. The brilliant Kostuba jewel is suspended from his neck. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The exact color of the garment of the Supreme Lord is described as saffron yellow, just like the pollen of a lotus flower. The Kostuba gem hanging on his chest is also described. His neck is beautifully decorated with jewels and pearls. The Lord is full in six opulences, one of which is wealth. He is very richly dressed with valuable jewels, which are not visible within this material world. Text 15. He also wears around his neck a garland of attractive sylvan flowers and a swarm of bees, intoxicated by its delicious fragrance. About the garland. I'm sorry. Uh, no. He also wears around his neck a garland of attractive sylvan flowers and a swarm of bees, intoxicated by its delicious fragrance, comes about the garland. He further superbly adorned with a pearl necklace, a crown, and pairs of armlets and bracelets and anklets. From this description, it appears that the flower garland of the Supreme Personality Godhead is fresh. Actually, in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual sky, there is nothing but freshness. Even the flowers picked from the trees and plants remain fresh, for everything in the spiritual sky retains its originality and does not fade. And now that's good information right there. The fragrance of the flowers picked up from the trees and made into garlands does not fade, for both the trees and the flowers are spiritual. When the flower is taken from the tree, it remains the same. It does not lose its aroma. The bees are equally attracted to the flowers, whether they are uh, on the garland or on the trees. The significance of spirituality is that everything is eternal and inexhaustible. Everything taken from everything remains everything, or as has been stated in the spiritual world, 1 minus 1 equals 1, and 1 plus 1 equals 1. The bees hum around the fresh flowers, and the sweet sound is enjoyed by the Lord. The Lord's bangles, necklace, crown, and anklets are all bedecked with invaluable jewels. Since the jewels and pearls are spiritual, there is no material calculation of their value. That means they're extremely, let's say, extremely valuable. There's no calculation of their value. Okay, so these are explanations of how the Lord looks and uh, what makes him unique from everybody else. Uh, so he has nice fragrance of the flowers picked from the trees and made into garlands, and they never fade. For both the trees and the flowers are spiritual. When the flower is taken from the tree, the Lord remains the same. He does not know, he does not lose, I'm sorry, its aroma. The bees are equally attracted to the flowers, whether they are on the garland or on the trees. The significance of spirituality is that everything is eternal and inexhaustible. In other words, never coming to an end. Everything taken from everything remains everything, or or as has been stated, in the spiritual world, 1 - 1 = 1, and 1 + 1 = 1. The bees hum around the fresh flowers, and their sweet sound is enjoyed by the Lord. The Lord's bangles, necklace, crown, and anklets are, are all meditated with. I'm sorry, they're all. I'm sorry, bedecked with invaluable jewels. Since the jewels and pearls are spiritual, there is no material calculation of their value. Well, the Lord obviously is unique. No one is equal to or greater than the Lord. Everyone is subordinate to the Lord. And this is in every way. In It includes the clothing, the jewelry, the looks, the aroma, everything is superior in the Lord. Text 16. His loins and hips encircled by a girdle, he stands on the lotus of his devotee's heart. He is most charming to look at, and his serene aspect gladdens the eyes and souls of the devotees who behold him. All right, now we're hearing specifically about the unique, beautiful appearance of the Lord, and with specific information. Purport: the word Darsani Yat Aman, which is used in this verse, means that the Lord is so beautiful that the devotee yogi does not wish to see anything else. His desire to see beautiful objects is completely satisfied by the sight of the Lord. In the material world, we want to see beauty, but the desire to is never satisfied. Except, okay. Because of material contamination, all the propensities we feel in the material world are ever unsatisfied. But when our desires to see, hear, touch, etc., are dovetailed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are on the level of the topmost perfection. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his eternal form is so beautiful and pleasing to the heart of the devotee, he does not attract the impersonalists who want to meditate on his impersonal aspect. Such impersonal meditation is simply fruitless labor. The actual yogis, with half closed eyes, fixed on the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not upon anything void or impersonal. Okay, let me read that last sentence. The actual yogis, with half closed eyes, fix on the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not upon anything void or impersonal. Now, to have half closed eyes is not easy. I mean, you could have them for a little bit, but to maintain uh, having your eyes half closed is very difficult to do. But it is let's say, an important aspect of having the correct vision of the Lord, to have the half half closed eyes. Okay. Text 17. The Lord is eternally very beautiful, and he is worshipable by all the inhabitants of every planet. He is ever youthful and always eager to bestow the blessings upon his, his devotees. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The word Sarva Loka Namaskritam means that he, meaning the Lord, is worshipable by everyone on every planet. There are innumerable planets in the material world and innumerable planets in the spiritual world as well. On each planet, there are innumerable inhabitants who worship the Lord, for the Lord is worshipable by all but the impersonalists. Supreme Lord is very beautiful. The word Sasvat is significant. It is not that he appears beautiful to the devotees, but is ultimately impersonal. Sasvat means, okay, it says, it is not that he appears beautiful to the devotees, but it's ultimately, but is ultimately impersonal. No, it is never impersonal, always. Sasvat means ever existing. That beauty is not temporary. It is ever existing. In other words, he never gets old. And his beautiful, let's say, demeanor is something that cannot be changed. He is always youthful. In the Brahma Samhita 5.33, it is also stated, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha. The original person is one without a second, yet he never appears old. He always appears as ever fresh as a blooming youth. That's what the term Navayovanam Cha, he never gets old. So, this is a very interesting statement. Uh, whenever whenever people make an image of God, it's usually it looks like an older man with some gray hair and uh, you know he has a beard and long hair, etc. And here it's explaining what he looks like differently. It says, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha. Navayovanam Cha means he never gets old. The original person is one without a second, yet he never appears old. He always appears ever fresh as a blooming youth. So anyone who draws a picture of God and makes him look like an old man, they don't know what they're talking about. The Lord's facial expression always indicates that he is ready to show favor and benediction to the devotees. For the non-devotees, however, he is silent. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, although he acts equally to everyone, because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because all entities are living entities, uh, are his sons. He is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. the Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. Okay, so every living entity has limited free will. Now, how limited is it? Well, it's limited to two choices only. Either you surrender to Krishna or you don't surrender to Krishna. That's the limitation. So there's no third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or 10th different choices. Either you surrender to the Lord or you don't surrender to the Lord. And it says here that Krishna is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. Well, reading this and knowing this means that God is always a friend of the living entity. He's not the enemy, and he's always the well-wisher of the living entities. But those living entities that become, uh, let's say, inimical to the Lord, uh, that's their own problem. The Lord is not an angry and vindictive person, although sometimes people think that he's vindictive. Look that word up, vindictive. Here it says, he is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. What does vindictive mean?
Uh, strong desire for revenge, or a tendency to seek retribution.
Right. So he's not a vindictive person. He's always positive. But if someone is, let's say, uh, engaging in activities to deny the existence of the Lord or to ridicule the existence of the Lord, then he will punish them. But that punishment is beneficial. Like, for example, if there is a thief and he has a gun and he's cornered, so he'll use the gun to kill and shoot people and kill them and to get free. That means that they are basically uh, angry and they will do anything to free themselves or to not be caught. The Lord is not vindictive. In other words, he's not a nasty person. He is always kind and gentle, but he can be, uh, let's say, very kind, very gentle, or more, let's say, angry than anyone else. But his anger is also purifying. It's not destructive. It purifies a person. So when someone is killed by Krishna, they don't go to hell. They go back to Godhead. So he's not a vindictive person, always thinking of doing negative things to people. Everything he does is good, whether he's blessing a devotee or killing a demon. It's always positive. It's always in the best interest of people. Therefore, it says here, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, although he acts equally to everyone, because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because all living entities are his sons, he is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. Okay, so yeah, although he's equal to everyone, still he shows special interest to the devotees, and that's only natural. Like, for example, if there was a house on fire, and in the house on fire, there was, let's say, your son and friends of your son, who would you, if you run into the fire of the house, who would you look for first? Who would you look for first? Yeah, of course. Everyone is like that, right? Then you might look, after you liberate your son, then you might go in a second time to liberate the relatives or the neighbors or whatever. So it's normal that the Lord will always favor his devotees. And that's why it says here the Lord's facial expression always indicates that he is ready to show favor and benediction to the devotees. For the non devotees, however, he is silent, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, although he acts equally to everyone because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and because all living entities are his sons. He is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. So, Krishna is not let's say, a mean person or an angry person or a vindictive person. He can be soft as a rose petal and hard as a, what do you call it? It could be as hard as a,
And
huh?
I think Vajrada Pikato, like as hard as the diamond, right?
Okay, yeah. However, um, he is very, let's say, uh, and he's inclined to always helping the devotees make spiritual advancement. That doesn't mean that he ignores the non devotees. He tries to help them, but uh, the they're not always amenable to receiving that help or that attention because of their enviousness. So it's not that the Lord is envious, it's that the people are envious. If you become envious of the Lord, you become envious of yourself. Uh, and because we are all part and parcel of the Lord. So we have to uh, understand that it says here uh, that the Lord is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. Well, that means that we should all try and become pure devotees. Then we have the special, uh, let's say, attention of the Lord. Although the Lord acts equally to everyone because is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, everyone is a child of the Lord, so therefore he's equal to everyone. And because all living entities are his sons. However, he is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, Just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. So we should all strive to become a pure devotee. Why? And well, then the Lord will give us special attention. Uh, and now, another main point here is when it says Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Nava Yovanam Cha. Nava Yovanam Cha means that he is always a fresh, uh, he's always a fresh looking youth. He never grows old. So, uh, can you look up in the internet uh, how people portray or how God is portrayed? So uh, they make pictures of God, and what does he look like? Because it's explaining here more or less what God looks like. And it says specifically uh, that he never appears old. He always appears as ever fresh, as a blooming youth. How is he portrayed?
think I need to ask because here it says in Judaism,
In what?
in Judaism,
Judaism. Okay.
he's portrayed as a singular, omniscient, omnipotent, eternal being, transcendent. I mean, I think it's just more describing words. What you want is in a picture, right?
Yes. There are pictures that,
That was on Maharaj you said earlier in the chapel ceiling.
yes, and yeah,
15
It's
chapel.
old, like
15 chapel.
Sistine Chapel, yeah.
teen chapel. Teen chapel ceiling. Like old white hair.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. So when I
There
asked
it
like,
is. That's great. It looks like has gray hair. Looks like an old guy. He got some wrinkles and things.
yeah. So here in I asked specifically in terms of when God is represented in pictures, how is he described? So there in Judaism again there are no descriptions. Judaism also forbids visual representations of God.
It's the
So
same for the Muslims.
yeah. But whereas Christianity, God the Father, often portrayed as an elderly man with white beard, symbolizing wisdom, power, and eternity.
There you go. That means Christians don't really know who God is. Because
Yeah.
here it says very clearly that he always appears as ever fresh as a blooming youth. He never appears old. Well, the Christians, they think of him as an old guy, but here it says he never appears old. He always appears as ever fresh as a blooming youth. That means the Christians don't really know who God is. So if they get one major element wrong, that means that they're going to be a lot more things that they get wrong about God. Okay. The Lord's facial expression always indicates that he is ready to show favor and benediction to the devotees. For the non-devotees, however, he is silent. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, although he acts equally to everyone because he is the Supreme Persona of Godhead, and because all living entities are his sons, he is especially inclined to those engaged in devotional service. The same fact is confirmed here. He is always anxious to show favor to the devotees, just as the devotees are always eager to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also very eager to bestow benediction upon the pure devotees. So there you go. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha. So this is an explanation of the eternal youthfulness of the devotee. I mean, of the Lord. He's always youthful, and it explains that he is one without a second, yet he never appears old. He always appears as ever fresh as a blooming youth. The Lord's facial expression always indicates that he is ready to show favor and benediction to the devotees. For the non-devotees, however, he is silent. Okay, so these are different descriptions of the devotee of the Lord, and
Earlier, you were trying to refer to this phrase, I think, softer than the flower and harder than the thunderbolt.
yes, right,
In Sanskrit, it's Kamala dapi kusuma, Vajra dapi kathora. Like Kamala means like flower, like lotus flower. So kusuma is like the softer than flower, yet harder than a thunderbolt.
right, nice. Okay, are there any questions? There's a lot of nice information here.
So here in this description, it's describing four-handed palm.
Okay.
Similar to how we read on Balaji. I mean, same things. They also decorate the Lord with all those things. So this is obviously the four-handed palm of the Lord here described. Every time the Lord's palm is described, so far it's been the four-handed palm, right? So in what canto? I mean, I think it's the 10th canto probably, but where Krishna is the source of all of this. But like, why aren't they describing Krishna by default here?
Why what?
Why aren't the scriptures describing Krishna as in like the Shyam Sundar form?
Two hands?
Yes.
That's his original form. The forearm form of the Lord is an expansion of the Lord, but the original form is two-handed. Like, let's see, what examples do we have of that? Well, when he appears as a uh, baby, at first he had a forearm form, but then his mother became uh, uh, very concerned because if Kamsa came and saw that he had four arms, he would try and kill him immediately. So she prayed that the Lord would only reveal himself with two arms, so that Kamsa would not think that he's God. So he changed from the forearm form to a two-arm form.
But that gives some of the people the argument that originally Lord was four-handed, and then he chose to be the two-handed. Why did he choose it that way? If his original form is, I mean, this is mainly the arguments of Vishnu Tattva is the source of Krishna, and Krishna Tattva source of Vishnu.
He turned from his four-arm form to two-arm form uh, because his mother was afraid that if Kamsa saw the four-arm form, he would immediately kill the child.
Right.
So she thought if he had a two-arm form, then he might not kill the child. He might not think that it's Krishna. So God is not limited by anything. Okay, now the question is, what is the original form of Krishna? What is the original form of Krishna? Why don't you look that up in our
Mhm.
uh, the elephant in the room? What is the original form of Krishna?
Because I think in the 11th chapter, specifically Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita about this particular, because when he Arjuna asks him like, I can't see you in this universal form, then he shows the four-handed. Then he talks about the two-handed form, and then he says this form of me is like very special. So I think in Brahma Samhita it is there, Maharaj. The original form of Krishna is described in Bhagavad Gita as it is, and also in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. So Krishna's original form is two-handed, holding a flute, and is described as the embodiment of beauty and sweetness, Ramasundara. This form is considered the highest manifestation of God, and it is eternal and transcendent.
But it's confidential.
Yeah,
His form as Shamsundar is his original form. His forearm form is an expansion of the two-arm form. In his forearm form, he will protect the devotee by killing. In his two-arm form, he doesn't kill. Look that up.
but in Krishna, in his own form, he killed the many demons, right?
Krishna in what?
In his two-handed form only, in according to Bhagavatam, didn't he kill many demons?
Well, what does it say? His two-handed form is very confidential, very rare. Only a pure devotee can see him in his two-arm form.
It says Krishna in his original two-handed form does kill demons. Um, Although Krishna's two-handed form is primarily associated with his playful and loving pastimes. So it's mainly,
He can do anything he wants.
yeah.
But to see him in his two-handed form is the desired way that at least Arjuna wanted to see him. He saw him in many different forms, and eventually he wanted to see only the two-armed form. So he appeared before Arjuna in his Virat Rupa form, the universal form, which is, mind-boggling. And then he changed into his four-armed form. But then Arjuna, pleaded, please show me your two-armed form. Okay, so let's go to text 18. The glory of the Lord is always worth singing, for his glories enhance the glories of his devotees. One should therefore meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead and upon his devotees. One should meditate on the eternal form of the Lord until the mind becomes fixed. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One has to fix his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly when one is accustomed to thinking of one of the innumerable forms of the Lord. And then it says, Krishna, Vishnu, Rama, Narayana, etc. He has reached the perfection of yoga. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. A person who has developed pure love for the Lord and whose eyes are smeared with the ointment of transcendental loving exchange always sees within his heart the Supreme Personality of God. The devotees especially see the Lord in his beautiful blackish form of Sham Sundar. Well, that Sham Sundar form is a two-armed form. That is the perfection of yoga. This yoga system should be continued until the mind does not vacillate for a moment. In other words, you don't never take your mind away from the Lord, the vision of the Lord. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Suraya. The form of Vishnu is the highest individuality and is always visible to sages and saintly persons. Well, the Vishnu forms are four-armed forms. The same purpose is served when a devotee worships the form of the Lord in the temple. There is no difference between devotional service in the temple and meditation on the form of the Lord, since the form of the Lord is the same whether it appears with the mind or in some concrete element. There are 8 kinds of forms recommended for the devotees to see. The forms may be made out of sand, clay, wood, or stone. They may be contemplated within the mind or made of jewels, metal, and painted colors. But all forms are of the same value. It is not that one who meditates on the form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolute and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Another significant word in this verse is punya sloka yashaskaram. The devotee is called punya sloka. As one becomes purified by chanting the holy name of the Lord, so one can become purified simply by chanting the name of a holy devotee. The pure devotee, one time Lord Chaitanya, instead of chanting the names of Krishna, chanted Gopi, Gopi, Gopi. And his disciples, they criticized him for it, you know. Uh, However, here it says that one can become purified simply by chanting the name of a holy devotee. The pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself are non-different. It is sometimes feasible to chant the name of a holy devotee. This is a very sanctified process. Lord Chaitanya was once chanting the holy names of the gopis when his students criticized him. Why are you chanting the names of the gopis? Why not Krishna? Lord Chaitanya was irritated by the criticism, and so there was some misunderstanding between him and his students. He wanted to chastise them for desiring to instruct him on the transcendental process of chanting. But what did the Lord do? He took sannyas because as a sannyasi, no one would criticize him. But as a regular, let's say, devotee or a non-sannyasi, he would be criticized. He could be criticized. So when he saw that these youthful, so-called devotees, when they heard him chanting Gopi, 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 they criticized him. Why are you chanting the names of gopis? So to stop that, he took sannyas, so that they would hesitate in insulting him. Okay. Well, let's see. Do we worship Krishna with 4 arms in the temple? No. Radha and Krishna are presented as 2 arms. Do we actually worship 4 arms forms of the Lord? We can, because it's a bona fide form of the Lord. Trying to think, are there any temples that have a 4-arm form of the Lord? There also, the Lord is worshipped in 6-arm form.
Lord Narasimha is
You got 4 arms. Lord Nrsimha's got 4 arms.
four hands.
What's that? What is it?
You've got 4 hands.
Yeah.
Same thing again. Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma.
Yeah. That's Lord
Uh,
Vishnu form.
yeah, I think instead of Padma, you will have one hand with a blessing pose. but in the other three hands he has got Shankha, Chakra, and Gada.
All right, so uh, actually, the Lord can appear in any form He wants.
Yeah,
He appears in a what is it? Four-armed form. He also appears in a six-armed form. Two arms, like Lord Chaitanya. Forget the two arms like Krishna. Two arms like what? Anyway, the Lord can appear in
Lord Rama.
Rama. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, what's important here, it says the devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shama Sundara. That is the perfection of yoga. This yoga system should be continued until the mind does not vacillate for a moment. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Surayu. The form of Vishnu is the highest individuality and is always visible to sages and saintly persons. But wait a minute, it says the devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shama Sundara. I always thought that Shama Sundara has two arms. What, look that up. Does Shama Sundara appear with four arms or two arms?
200 pounds.
What?
To be 200 Shamsundara.
Yeah. So that is the most, let's say, intimate form. That's why it says here, devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shama Sundara. That is the perfection of yoga.
Yeah. 400 forms are typically with Lord Vishnu expansions, and then 200 forms are with Krishna and Rama, Balaram.
Yeah, okay. So, but here it says the devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shama Sundara. That Shama Sundara, that is the perfection of yoga. This yoga system should be continued until the mind does not vacillate for a moment. Okay, well, that is our takeaway right there. The devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shamasundar. That is the perfection of yoga. So it says here also that one has to fix his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. When one is accustomed to thinking of one of the innumerable forms of the Lord, then he names Krishna, Vishnu, Rama, Narayana. So Krishna is two armed, Vishnu is four armed, Rama is two armed, Narayana is four armed. He has reached the perfection of yoga. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. a person who was, well, let's see, Arjuna, which form did he prefer? First of all, he sees the universal form, and that he becomes flummoxed or he's confused by seeing.
He really becomes afraid.
Yeah, he becomes afraid, right? And then he sees the four-arm form, but then he asks the Lord, please present yourself in your two-arm form. Where is that
Yeah,
being
that's
said?
the 11th chapter, 50. Yeah, so the 52nd. So here, 51st onwards, he says, when Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, basically that's after two-handed form, he said, "Oh Janardana, seeing this human-like form, so beautiful, so very beautiful, I'm now composed in my mind and I'm now restored to my original nature." Then the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, this form of mine you are now seeing, that is the two-handed form,
It's
is
very,
very
very
difficult to behold.
right.
Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunity to see this form, which is so dear." Then Krishna continues to say, "The form you're seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing the serious penances, or by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am."
It's by love.
Yes, then it says, "My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding."
Yes.
So that's where Krishna clearly reveals that only the two-handed form is the ultimate, and even the demigods are eager to.
So the form of Balaji is a four-arm form.
Yes.
So it says here the impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, well, the Omkara is round. It's a round form. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Another significant another significant word in this verse is Punya Sloka Yasaskaram. The devotee is called Punya Sloka. As one becomes purified by chanting the holy name of the Lord, so one can become purified simply by chanting the name of a holy devotee. So Lord Chaitanya was at one time was chanting Gopi, Gopi, Gopi. A pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself are non-different. It is sometimes feasible to chant the name of a holy devotee. This is a very sanctified process. Lord Chaitanya was once chanting the holy names of the gopis when his students criticized him. Why are you chanting the names of the gopis? Why not Krishna? Lord Chaitanya was irritated by this criticism, and so there was some misunderstanding between him and his students. He wanted to chastise them for desiring to instruct him on the transcendental process of chanting. But actually, what he did was he took sannyas. Now his devotees would never criticize him. At that time that they criticized him, he was married. But when this happened, and he was chanting Gopi, 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 and his disciples criticized him. So at that point, he decided to take sannyas so that they would never criticize him. Because by criticizing the Lord, it's actually detrimental for his devotees. Because he's the Lord. If you criticize the Lord, then that's actually an aparad. So to avoid his disciples from criticizing him, he took sannyas. Now they would not criticize him because it's very clear you criticize a genuine sannyasi, that's a aparad, sinful. Okay. It says here, there are 8 kinds of forms recommended for the devotees to see. The forms may be made out of sand, clay, wood, or stone. They may be contemplated within the mind or made of jewels, metal, or painted colors. But all forms are of the same value. It is not that one who meditates on the form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality of God is absolute, and therefore, and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form, but it's a round type of form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Okay, so, but in this particular verse, text 18, another significant word in this verse is punya sloka yasaskaram. The devotee is called punya sloka. As one becomes purified by chanting the holy name of the Lord, so one can become purified simply by chanting the name of a holy devotee. The pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself are non-different. It is sometimes feasible to chant the name of a holy devotee. This is a very sanctified process. Lord Chaitanya was once chanting the holy names of the gopis when his students criticized him. Why are you chanting the names of the gopis? Why not Krishna? Lord Chaitanya was irritated by the criticism, and so there was some misunderstanding between him and his students. He wanted to chastise them for desiring to instruct him on the transcendental process of chanting. The beauty of the Lord is that the devotees who are connected with his activities are also glorified. Arjuna, Prahlada, Janaka Maharaj, Bali Maharaj, and many other devotees were not even in the renounced order of life, but were householders. Some of them, such as Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, were born of demoniac families. Prahlad Maharaj's father was a demon, and Bali Maharaja was the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. But still, they have become famous because of their association with the Lord. Anyone who is eternally associated with the Lord is glorified with the Lord. The conclusion is that a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. Are there any questions?
Any questions online?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Sanatan Das here, Maharaj. Maharaj, when we have to fix our mind on the Supreme Personality Lord, as it is going, as it is mentioned in this particular verse, so which form of the Lord we have to? Is it any form or any devotee is also fine? Is that the way it is mentioned in the purport, or we have to fix our mind firstly on the Shyamasundara form?
Okay, that's a good question.
Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita recommends the Shyam Sundara form. That's in the 18th chapter.
All right.
Let's see.
Here it says, it is not that one who meditates on the form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality God is absolute, and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Okay, so it says the same purpose is served when a devotee worships the form of the Lord in the temple. There's no difference between devotional service in the temple and meditation on the form of the Lord, since the form of the Lord is the same, whether he appears within the mind or in some concrete element. There are 8 kinds of forms recommended for the devotees to see. The forms may be made out of sand, clay, wood, or stone. They may be contemplated within the mind or made of jewels, metal, or painted colors. But all forms are of the same value. It is not that, okay, there it is. All forms are of the same value. It is not that one who meditates on the form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality of God is absolute, and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Okay, so the Lord can appear in any form he wants. And he's always the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is understood by devotees, not understood by the Mayavadis.
I think the question is which form should we be meditating on? And I just pulled up the 18th chapter, 65th verse.
The form of Shamsundar.
Yeah, that's where, because here I pulled up online Maharaj in Bhagavad Gita. Do you want me to read?
Yeah.
So this particular in the 18th chapter, 65th purport, Prabhupada says these words stress that one should concentrate his mind upon Krishna. the very form with two hands carrying a flute, the bluish boy with a beautiful face and peacock feathers in his hair. There are descriptions of Krishna found in Brahma Samhita and other literatures. One should fix his mind on this original form of Godhead, Krishna. One should not even divert his attention to other forms of the Lord. The Lord has multi forms as Vishnu, Narayana, Rama, Varaha, etc. But a devotee should concentrate his mind on the form that was present before Arjuna. Concentration of the mind on the form of Krishna constitutes the most confidential part of the knowledge. And this is disclosed to Arjuna because Arjuna is the most dear friend of Krishna's. So that's the specific instruction for the devotees.
Very good. Yeah, Krishna's form as Shyam Sundar is most confidential form of the Lord. And so some people, they worship the form of the Lord as Varaha. Does that mean they're wrong? No. Varaha, Varaha is also the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna can assume any form he wants, but the most confidential form of the Lord is that of Shama Sundara. It's a two-armed form with three, let's say, three bending parts of his body, with the peacock feather and so forth. It's explained and it's described specifically. And that is the form that Arjuna desired to see the Lord. Although he asked the Lord to show his universal form. Why did he do that? It was because in the future he knew that people would, let's say, criticize the Lord as being a mundane person. So he wanted the Lord to be able to manifest his universal form as Virat Rupa, so that no one would criticize him. But then he said, well, my mind now is being, I'm disturbed by seeing this gigantic form of yours. And then the Lord presented his forearm form. But then finally he was asked to go back or revert back to his two-armed form. And then the mind of the devotee was pacified. Just imagine if you see the Virat Rupa form of the Lord. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And when you see the forearm form, well, that's very nice. When Krishna left the gopis, they were searching for him, and they came upon the forearm form of the Lord, and they were not really interested in seeing it. I mean, they paid their obeisances and so forth, but they were not very attracted to it. So they continued learning, seeking the Lord, and they finally found the Lord in his two-armed form. And then they were pacified. So the two-armed form of the Lord is very confidential. And the Lord assumes that form for his pure devotees so that they can, so if he appears in his forearm form, they can't worship him intimately. In his two-arm form, the gopis can worship him intimately. In its four-arm form, everything is what you would say ritually formalized. You can't hug Narayana. You know? But in its two-arm form, you can play leapfrog with the Lord. Let me see what it says. Stay here 1 second. Okay, I'm not finding what I want to read. That's it in the Canto, chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, text 3 and 4. It says, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in welfare of all at last achieve me. And in the purport it says, those who do not directly worship the Supreme Godhead Krishna, but who attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal, Sri Krishna. After many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudeva is all. That's a direct verse.
Bhavanam Janmanamante.
Yeah. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, that is 12th chapter, verses 3 and 4, uh, when a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there is no perfect realization. Often there is much penance involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the supersoul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present everywhere. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. And then it says, but those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Prita, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. And the purport says, it is explicitly stated here that the devotees are very fortunate to be delivered very soon from material existence by the Lord. In pure devotional service, one comes to the realization that God is great and that the individual soul is subordinate to him. His duty is to render service to the Lord. And if he does not, then he will render service to Maya. As stated before, the Supreme Lord can be appreciated only by devotional service. Therefore, one should be fully devoted. One should fix his mind fully on Krishna in order to achieve him. One should work only for Krishna. It does not matter in what kind of work one engages, but that work should be done only for Krishna. That is the standard of devotional service. The devotee does not desire any achievement other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His life's mission is to please Krishna, and he can sacrifice everything for Krishna consciousness and for Krishna's satisfaction, just as Arjuna did in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The process is very simple. One can devote himself in his occupation and engage at the same time in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Such transcendental chanting attracts the devotee to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord herein promises that without delay, he will deliver a pure devotee thus engaged from the ocean of material existence. Those who are advanced in yoga practice can willfully transfer the soul to whatever planet they like by the yoga process, and others take the opportunity in various ways. But as far as the devotee is concerned, it is clearly stated here that the Lord himself takes him. The devotee does not need to wait to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. In the Varaha Purana, this verse appears. Nayami paramam sthanam archir adigatim vina. Garuda skandam aropya yatech kyam anivarvita. The purport of this verse is that a devotee does not need to practice Ashtanga Yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planets. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord himself. He clearly states here that he himself becomes the deliverer. A child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once riding on his bird carrier Garuda, and at once delivers the devotee from material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from his material existence. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. In the Narayana Iya, this is confirmed as follows. The purport of this verse is that one should not engage in the different processes of fruitive activity or cultivate knowledge by the mental speculative process. One who is devoted to the Supreme Personality can attain all the benefits derived from other yogic processes, speculation, rituals, sacrifices, charity. That is the specific benediction of devotional service. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. A devotee of the Lord can approach the supreme destination easily and happily, but this destination cannot be approached by any other process of religion. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is that in the 18th chapter, Sarvadharmam Purityajya Mamekam Saranam Braja Aham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshishami Mahasucha. One should give up all other processes of self-realization and simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There's no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life, because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of it. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Let everyone take shelter of the supreme omnipotent Godhead, Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. And then the next verse says, just fix your mind upon me, supreme personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without doubt. The purport, one who is engaged in Lord Krishna's devotional service lived in a direct relationship with the Supreme Lord. So there is no doubt that his position is transcendental from the very beginning. A devotee does not live on the material plane. He lives in Krishna. The holy name of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. Therefore, when a devotee chants Hare Krishna, Krishna and his internal potency are dancing on the tongue of the devotee. When he offers Krishna food, Krishna directly accepts these eatables, and the devotee becomes Krishnized by eating the remnants. One who does not engage in such service cannot understand how this is so, although this is a process recommended in the Bhagavad Gita and in other Vedic literatures. And then the next verse says, my dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. In this verse, two different processes of Bhakti Yoga are indicated. The first applies to one who has actually developed an attachment for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by transcendental love. And the other is for one who has not developed an attachment for the Supreme Person by transcendental love. For this second class, there are different prescribed rules and regulations one can follow to be ultimately elevated to the stage of attachment to Krishna. Bhakti Yoga is the purification of the senses. At the present moment in material existence, the senses are always impure, being engaged in sense gratification. But by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, these senses can become purified. And in the purified state, they come directly in contact with the Supreme Lord. In this material existence, I may be engaged in some service to some master, but I don't really lovingly serve my master. I simply serve to get some money. And the master also is not in love. He takes service from me and pays me. So there's no question of love. But for spiritual life, one must be elevated to the pure stage of love. That stage of love can be achieved by practice of devotional service performed with the present senses. This love of God is now in a dormant state in everyone's heart. And there, love of God is manifested in different ways, but it is contaminated by material association. Now the heart has to be purified of the material association, and that dormant natural love for Krishna has to be revived. That is the whole process. To practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, one should, under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, follow certain principles. One should rise early in the morning, take bath, enter the temple and offer prayers and chant Hare Krishna. Then collect flowers to offer to the deity, cook foodstuffs to offer to the deity, take prasadam and so on. There are various rules and regulations which one should follow, and one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees. This practice can help anyone rise to the level of love of God, and then he is sure of his progress into the spiritual kingdom of God. This practice of Bhakti Yoga under the rules and regulations with the direction of a spiritual master will surely bring one to the stage of love of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Yeah, I'm reading from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 9 and 10. So, we should fix our mind on the form of Shyam Sundar and engage in pure devotional service to the Lord without any material motive. So it says here, this love of God is now in a dormant state in everyone's heart. And their love of God is manifested in different ways, but it is contaminated by material association. Now the heart has to be purified of material association, and that dormant natural love of Krishna has to be revived. That is the whole process. To practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, one should, under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, follow certain principles. One should rise early in the morning, take baths, enter the temple and offer prayers and chant Hare Krishna. Then collect flowers to offer to the deity, cook food stuff to offer to the deity, take prasadam and so on. There are various rules and regulations which one should follow, and one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees. This practice can help anyone rise to the level of love of God, and then he is sure of his progress into the spiritual kingdom of God. This practice of Bhakti Yoga under the rules and regulations with the direction of a spiritual master will surely bring one to the stage of love of God, which is the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness. Haribol. Okay, are there any questions? So I was reading from chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, text number 9. Unless we come to the stage of love of God, our practice is not perfect. But with the help of the direction of a bona fide spiritual master or spiritual masters, one will surely bring one to the stage of love of God. Haribol. Okay, questions, comments?
One question, Maharaj. Yeah. On the today's report, number 18, 3.28.18. In the second last paragraph, there is a line, the pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself are non-different. The paragraph starts with another significant word in this verse. Is Punya Shloka, that paragraph.
Yeah.
So third or fourth one. The pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself are non-different. But we know they are different, but like, we can explain more. Like, my understanding is that they are non-different in terms of we are giving the respect, but actually they are different as well, because one is Lord and another is devotee. So I'm just trying to understand more on this non-different.
Well, the message will be the same. Whether you hear it directly from the Lord or you hear it from pure devotee. So, in other words, if a pure devotee is speaking about the Lord, it's equal to the Lord speaking himself. He will not deviate at all from the pure, explanation of Krishna consciousness. That's why it says, let's see what it says here. The same purpose is served when a devotee worships the form of the Lord in the temple. There's no difference between devotional service in the temple and meditation on the form of the Lord, since the form of the Lord is the same whether he appears within the mind or in some concrete element. There are 8 kinds of forms recommended for the devotees to see. The forms may be made out of sand, clay, wood, or stone. They may be contemplated within the mind or made of jewels, metal, or painted color. But all the forms are of the same value. It is not that one who meditates on the form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolute, and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round form. They especially prefer the Omkara, which which also has form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. But as devotees of the Lord, we prefer the form of the Lord as Shamsundar, threefold form of the Lord with his flute and his basically chanting and dancing. So that is what the devotees meditate on. Now you can also meditate on Lord Vishnu and make spiritual advancement. But the most confidential form of the Lord is his two-armed form. And eventually one will come to this two-armed form, meditating on the two-armed form. Just like Arjuna, he wanted to see the universal form. But after seeing the universal form, it disturbed his mind. So he asked Krishna, he came to his four-armed form. And after seeing the four-armed form, he was not satisfied. So then he asked the Lord to manifest his two-armed form. And when the Lord manifested his two-armed form, then he became very satisfied. But that just proves that the two-armed form of the Lord is the most confidential form of the Lord and the most satisfying form to meditate on. Just like there's candy, so candy can be sweet, sweeter, or sweetest. Right? It's all candy, but there's different levels of sweet. And it's the same with Krishna and his forms. There are certain forms that are sweet, there are the forms that are sweeter, and there's forms that is sweetest. But they're all forms of Krishna. Okay, any questions? I think we're over time now.
Yes.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. And our takeaway today is the beauty of the Lord is that the devotees who are connected with his activities are also glorified. Arjuna, Prahlada, Janaka Maharaj, Bali Maharaj, and many other devotees were not even in the renounced order of life, but were householders. Some of them, such as Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, were born of demoniac families. Prahlad Maharaj's father was a demon, and Bali Maharaja was the grandson of Prahlad Maharaja. But still, they have become famous because of their association with the Lord. Anyone who is eternally associated with the Lord is glorified with the Lord. The conclusion is that a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. Haribol. And in the same purport, it says, one has to fix his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. When one is accustomed to thinking of one of the innumerable forms of the Lord, like Krishna, Vishnu, Rama, Narayana, etc., he has reached the perfection of yoga. This is confirmed in Brahma Samhita. A person who has developed pure love for the Lord and whose eyes are smeared with the ointment of transcendental loving exchange. That's usually when your eyes are crying out of love for the Lord. Always sees within his heart the Supreme Personality of God. The devotees especially see the Lord in the beautiful blackish form of Shyam Sundara. That is the perfection of yoga. This yoga system should be continued until the mind does not vacillate for a moment. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Suraya. The form of Vishnu is the highest individuality and is always visible to sages and saintly persons. The same purpose is served when a devotee worships the form of the Lord in a temple. There is no difference between devotional service in a temple and meditation on the form of the Lord, since the form of the Lord is the same whether it appears within the mind or in some concrete element. There are eight kinds of forms recommended for the devotees to see. The forms may be made out of sand, clay, wood, or stone. They may be contemplated within the mind or made of jewels, metal, or painted colors. But all the forms are of the same value. It is not that one who meditates on a form within the mind sees differently from one who worships the form in the temple. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolute, and there is no, and there is therefore no difference between the two. The impersonalists who desire to disregard the eternal form of the Lord imagine some round figure. They especially prefer the Omkara, which also has form. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that Omkara is the letter form of the Lord. Similarly, there are statue forms and painting forms of the Lord. Okay, that is our lesson for today. So the takeaway is, the conclusion is that a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. Well, we see the form of the Lord every day when we go to the temple and bow down in front of the deities and see the beautiful form of Radha and Krishna and Sita, Rama. So, a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. So, we should always continue meditating on the beautiful form of Radha and Krishna in the temple, or Sita and Ram, and engage in devotional service to the Lord. That'll bring us to the point of spiritual perfection.
One small clarification. The word unless, what does it mean here? This last line. It says unless the mind. So does it mean after one's mind is fixed, we don't need to practice yoga? Or what does it mean? Unless.
Unless word means you have to do this. If you don't do it, then you're making a mistake. So where are you seeing that?
Last line, you have just read.
Yeah, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. Okay. The conclusion is that a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord. And unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga. Well, we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day, right? So what is the purpose of it? It's to fix our mind on Krishna. Unless the mind is fixed in that. In other words, unless we're always chanting, then we should continue. If we're not always chanting, we should continue practicing yoga. So, in other words, if you're always chanting your rounds every day, always thinking about Krishna, always serving Krishna, always eating Krishna prasadam, always going to Sankirtan, always doing different practices of devotional service, then you're Krishna conscious. And if you're not doing that, then you should associate with devotees on a regular basis so that you will do it. If you associate with devotees on a regular basis every day, you will chant your rounds, you will have prasadam, you will hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, you will go on Sankirtan, and you'll do all these things because of the association with devotees. And in that way, the mind is fixed. And if you don't do that, then you have to really every day associate with devotees. If you associate with devotees, you'll do all these things. If you don't associate with devotees, then eventually you'll give up trying to be Krishna conscious. Okay, thank you very much. What time is it now? 8:39. Huh?
8:34.
8:34. So it is time.
Yes, Maharaj, we are over time.
Overtime. Yeah, really overtime. What day is it today?
It is Friday, Maharaj.
Friday. Okay. Good. All right. Thank you very much. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Bol.